Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our class tonight here with Guy Finley, and welcome to all of you in the room and all of you out there in the internet land. If you're in the room, I just want, so I remember, please turn off your cell phones or silence them now if you have one with you. Tonight's class, if you're new, it's going to run around 90 minutes. Guy will give about a 60-minute talk. We'll take a 5-minute break, and then we'll come back for about 25 minutes of questions and answers where you can talk directly to Guy if you wish. And if you're on one of the other platforms, Facebook or YouTube, you can write any questions you want in the chat box there, and they'll come to me, and I'll be able to ask Guy these questions in the second part of class. So do participate. Wednesday nights are a night of participation. Guy will also ask you to participate at some point, and he'll lead you into that as well, and feel free to do that. Any technical problems for those of you out there? Kate is behind the scenes to help you as best she can, so do take advantage of that, and we want to welcome you here tonight, and I'll go ahead and read tonight's topic. Escape the unseen prison of painful dependency.
Before I read the key lesson that will set the stage for our study this evening, I would like to do as I always do and welcome the men and women who've come to the foundation sitting here, and of course all of you who are joining us from wherever you are in the world, even if it's not live, whatever day or time it is that you do catch this presentation, these ideas that I will share with you. They are and do represent an offer to change your life in the most meaningful possible way. And most of us, to one extent or another, recognize that there is a need to be a different kind of human being, but we don't have a lot of direction, a lot of understanding as to how that takes place. And that's where, for those of you who have ears to hear and eyes to see, that's where it is through the exposure to very distinct ideas. I just put what is timeless into the words that I put them into, but it's the same principles that have been helping men and women for as long as individuals have recognized the need to help themselves to something that they have been unable to do for themselves, to find for themselves. Those are the ideas that are the most valuable. And we have an aggressive class tonight. We always have a list that we work on together so we can see what we share in common in this unconscious nature that we are working to shed light in and upon. And we'll have 2 of those lists tonight if all goes well. So let me read the key lesson to you, and then we'll get underway. Nice deep breath. Escape the unseen prison of painful dependency. Here's the key lesson. No single substance, whether physical, mental, or emotional, creates an addiction, let alone the pain and conflict inherent in its corresponding dependency. Rather, dependency is the birthplace of all false solutions with which we first become identified and then become addicted to, in the vain hope that it has the power to release us from a pain we have yet to understand, let alone resolve. In that short paragraph, that key lesson, is hidden a tremendous secret. Our mind looks out at the world and sees the conditions that we fall into or lend ourselves to as being the source of our captivity that we have no say over whatsoever other than to fight with them and try to change the world. But this key lesson says something entirely different to you. that the captivity of any form of addiction is not because of the chemical, the physical thoughts, the feelings, but rather because innate in us is this tendency to always identify with and then depend upon something outside of ourselves. And it is always in those moments when that identity and that attachment, that dependency is challenged, that suddenly we find ourselves much like this little story I'm going to tell you. So here's a couple brothers, a couple bros, as they like to say. It always surprises me when people, hey bro. One bro is visiting another bro in the city of brotherly love. And they haven't seen each other for quite some time, and one brother's visiting, the younger brother's visiting the elder brother because he sensed there's some problem, but he can't put his finger on it, so comes to stay for a couple weeks just to get his finger on the pulse of things. And so they are sitting in that living room watching Monday Night Football. And there's this huge knock at the door, boom, 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 like that. And then no one even bothers to wait for the door to be open. The door crashes down, and in run 3 men and 3 women, all dressed in black, and throw a hood over his brother's head, beat him up a little bit, and then carry him off. Phew. Now, the younger brother is stunned, and he tries to follow them, but he can't do it. They just disappear, literally just disappear. So he calls the police, and he files a report. And then 24 hours later, his brother walks in the front door, looking a little worse for the wear. And he says, what happened? I've never seen anything like that. No, don't worry about it. It's nothing. Nothing. Don't worry about it. Intimidating his younger brother. So that's fine. They just go on. The door is repaired. 4 nights later, what happens? Exact same thing. And he's there for 2 weeks, and this happens, 4 times over a 2-week period. Finally says to his older brother, look, you can try to intimidate me all you want, but I want to know what in the world is going on. How long has this been taking place? His older brother says, listen, little bro, it's no big deal. Sure, they beat me up a little bit, but they treat me when they take me to the prison they put me in, and they always let me out within a day or 2. You saw that. I'm home safe and sound. Now, does that story sound ridiculous to you? Yes or no? You say, well, that's the most ridiculous thing I ever heard in my life. That is your life. And we're going to look at it deeply. Because is it true or is it not that almost anything can happen, and there is a pounding at the door of this brain, and the door is broken down, and thoughts and feelings rush in and throw a black hood over your head and start beating you up a little bit, and then take you where they take you, you struggling the whole time as if I don't deserve this. And then it's like a miracle. 2 or 3 days later, you're back in your easy chair watching Thursday night football or whatever it is you do, PGA golf for some of us. Now, what I want to work at with you this evening is to help you understand the nature of this prison. Because, and I need you to agree, and if you want to disagree, that's fine. I need you to agree that when you're caught up resenting somebody, angry at something, fearful over some news, reliving something painful from the past, anticipating some negative outcome in the future, that when that's going on, are you a free human being? Now, be careful, because you see, you do think you're free, because in those moments, there is always some part of you that takes the impressions of those negative reactions and then allows you, in quotes, to figure out what to do with those conditions so that you are free in your mind to save yourself again from those problems. Yes or no? But the solution that we're looking at here, if we want to see one at all, is how long do I want to live in a house where any moment something can bang on the door and I'm carried off by anxiety, by anger, by fear, by doubt, or whatever it is that I'm carried off by? How long do you want to live like that? That's the question. Do you? Then the question has to be begged, how long have I lived like that? And it's a simple question. How long have I lived sitting in my living room, driving in my car, on the phone with somebody, sitting in front of my computer, and in a heartbeat, something has thrown a hood, meaning I go blind, I get pushed around, I get carried off someplace where they treat me, meaning that I get through it okay, and then I come out and then I get to do it again and again and again. How many of you at least would like to stop doing that again and again and again? So how does that begin to come to an end? Here's where it gets difficult already. The only way in which we come to an end of this unconscious relationship with whatever are those conditions, those characters, those qualities that come out of nowhere, capture us and throw us into a prison that we sit and struggle in, and then, hey, good news, you're released, meaning suddenly you have something else to think about or do, and then you're not struggling anymore. Yes or no? If we really want to understand what's going on, then we're going to have to realize something that is the most difficult thing for any human being along the path to do. And it is a principle requirement. And you know what it is? You have to absolutely begin to realize that you don't have a clue about why you suffer. You don't. Because every time you're thrown into a prison, and when you're picked up like that and pushed around, bullied by thoughts and feelings, are you suffering? And what happens to the awareness of that suffering? What becomes of the fact that oh my God, where does that go? It is instantly remanded over to something that steps in on our behalf to realize and then reconcile whatever it is that has captured us into a state of being copacetic once again. And there I am. I've been unharmed. I've been handed back. But I don't see the harm. And you know what the real harm is? Is that every time that happens, you miss the opportunity to discover the real source of that captivity. And worse, you're not getting younger. The energy that you need in order to be present enough to start doing the work that is required of an individual who wants to get out of this prison is that they have to start understanding that the difficulty here is that if I'm ever going to have any insight at all into this unusual condition where I'm made a captive of these reactions of my own resistance, I'm going to have to recognize beyond the shadow of a doubt there isn't one solution I know that's going to save me. Not one solution is going to bring an end to my suffering. Now, do you understand why that's a tough row to hoe? Because what else do I have? I'm thrown into this prison of painful thoughts and feelings, captured and thrown behind the bars of some bitterness from my past or some fear of the future. And every time it happens, I'm sitting there, whether I'm with people or by myself, and my mind instantaneously knows what has happened, and it knows what needs to be done to those people and unkind circumstances that have come along and captured me again. So now you begin to have a small understanding of what it means that one must lose their life to find it. One must give up something in order to gain something of immense value. But our problem is what's going to take the place? I can't possibly live here in this prison that I'm feeling and not rattle the bars. Do you understand the metaphor, the analogy? I can't just sit behind the bars I've been thrown in. I don't deserve to be there. Do you? Isn't that part of it? I don't deserve to be treated like this. I don't deserve for this to happen to me, who is so magnanimous, so wonderful and giving, that just doesn't seem right that God would treat me like that. So what I'm asking you to see, what is the nature, at least at the first glimpse, the true nature of the source of this suffering that imprisons us? The true source of it. What does that mean? Well, I know all of the false answers. You, they, them, this, it, when, was. But I can at least begin to realize all that has been proven futile. If I want to understand the nature of the prison that I find myself in, I'm going to have to explore the consciousness that creates it. The last thing I want to do, I say I want to, the last thing I want to do, why? Because I can no longer have anyone or anything around me to blame for being beat up and embittered, angry, and resentful. Not one thing. Not one reason for my fear. Not one. Not one. Am I making that emphatic enough? Because every time those states, that resistance rises up, man, I am instantaneously made a prisoner of my struggle to change or escape anyone or anything in that moment that my mind points to as being the one who has imprisoned me. So I'm going to have to do the unthinkable. Now, just to come to a close to the first part of this, why is exploring the nature of the prison unthinkable to us? Because it means that I realize that there is no cause outside of myself for feeling like I'm a captive. That's why. Do you see it? Take a deep breath, because I have to show you something now. And I would listen to this talk maybe 8, 10, 12 times if I were you, so that you could see what I'm pointing to. We are not lovers of facts. We are lovers of fantasy. We are lovers of dreams, not reality, because we don't understand the experience of reality for a very good reason. For one, we have been immersed and conditioned by a culture that is dedicated to the avoidance of anything other than the pursuit of pleasure or the way to protect ourselves from pain. Neither which pleasure or pain exist without what? Neither of those conditions exist without what? Without identification. So the first hint that the prison we are in is not made up of individuals or conditions that come along and snare us, but rather that we live within a consciousness that only knows to identify with things that it believes will free it or save it from itself or the world that it blames for imprisoning it. And that it is to the extent of this identification with these images, these thoughts and feelings, that we find ourselves suddenly imprisoned anytime any moment comes along and challenges that identity. This is an important point. Still following me? Now here comes what's breathtaking. Take a breath. A good student, how many of you are good students? Yes, you are, my wife. A good student never runs by, never passes over the opportunity to see and learn something new about themselves and the relationship that they call themselves, the relationship they have with life. That was a dead-end sentence. DOA. So here's an example of what I'm talking about, being a fearless student. Now, I don't know if any of you have ever, now what are we talking about? We're talking about prison. I don't know if any of you ever actually studied or thought deeply about what it's like to live in prison. Most of us wouldn't even get a thought. It's of no interest to me, which is interesting because on one hand, I can sit and agree that I often find myself in prison, but I don't relate it at all to anything other than those problems that appear and throw me in it. If you were to examine the life, the experience of prisoners, you would be able, for instance, to draw a parallel between their world that is behind walls and bars and filled with guards. You'd be able to draw a direct parallel to that world with the prevailing culture of our present world. A direct parallel. Because in this world, please, are there not walls and bars and guards keeping me from getting to this idea of final freedom, my final peace of mind? There's a wall, there's a guard, there's bars. Why is the world keeping me from this? Yes or no? So the promise of winning my freedom cannot be separated from the fact that in having named that freedom, that idea that would finally liberate me, the very identification with that idea and the path I must take produces, as I run into anything that challenges it, the sudden sense of being in prison. Because look what I'm being denied. I'm being denied what I need. Now listen, next parallel. I'm being denied what I need to climb to the top, to make it however I think making it is. Do you understand that? Well, what do you think happens in prison? A prison is God help those that deserve the help. God help us to understand that prison is nothing but a system in which an individual enters into a preordained culture that is made up of disparate warring groups led by individuals, each and every one influencing the group drawn to them for whatever their particular ideology, so that in drawing together and making a group of power, they can gradually overpower whatever other leaders and groups stand in their way, keeping them from realizing the final freedom in that prison, which is to be in charge of all the mates. Sweet God, do you not see the parallel? What is your life like? It's always about trying to figure out what I can pull to myself, how I can rise to the top, how I can gather the influence I need, and when all of that's together, no matter what's in my way, I'll have enough power to push everyone and everything else out of the way, and I will be the king of the hill in a prison. It's funny how long things take to mature. I couldn't have been 20 years old when I thought to myself that this world, our earth, is a penal colony, a galactic penal colony. And it is. And I can't see it at all. Not the planet. Planet's beautiful. Be a lot better off without us, except that we're needed for certain things to take place here. I'm in the prison of an unconscious nature. Not my unconscious nature, although it has its individual characteristics. Not your unconscious nature, and it has its peculiarities. But I am in the prison of an unconscious mind that is and always creating a prison for itself by trying to figure out how to escape the experience of itself, which it can't do. Is that not a prison? Wasn't Groundhog Day in its own strange way a kind of prison where one was doomed, cursed, if you want to use that word, cursed to repeat and reincarnate the consciousness that at that particular moment created the world around it, so that it had to go through the world over and over and over again in order to finally start recognizing this world is never going to change. And if anything's going to change, not because I want to, but I have to do something other with my relationship to it. And in that realization of the prison that is produced by my own unconscious nature, the awakening to that unconscious nature begins to produce the way out of it, as it did in that movie. That's why that movie was popular. And what happens when you have individuals living in a prison? Let's go back to the microcosmic version. What happens when you have individuals living like that? What happens? Well, it breeds conflict. It breeds it. Yes or no? And when conflict is bred, what is the ultimate outcome of conflict that is being bred in a limited population? What is the ultimate outcome? Violence. War. Now you can see that in a prison, can't you? Yes or no? Can you blow up your head big enough to allow the fact that I've just described to you this world and the way that humanity lives and operates in it? Why do you think there's wars? Because this group wants authority over that group so that that group can achieve security, and in achieving security, finally get to the top of the line where they have everything they want. Except there's a problem with everything I want, is that you want it too. Only what you want is in the way of what I want, and that's called what? War. So, look, I don't know how much you can absorb of an idea like that, because I realize it's not entirely palatable. But what if I even suspected for a moment that everything I do to escape this prison that I find myself thrown in does absolutely nothing other than ensure I will find myself back in the same cell again after I've been delivered from whatever deluded idea or imagination I have about how to get out of it. Because how do I change, listen to this, how do I change cells in this prison? By changing cells. Just an eye changes, doesn't it? I didn't change I. Something happened and suddenly I see a completely different way to live. I'm going to love Moses instead of Jesus. I'm going to become a Buddhist instead of a Hindu. I'm going to make $1 million. And then what happens in those moments that takes place? Where does not in a prison, doesn't the mob destroy the prison if they have the opportunity? Can't wait to break out and destroy the prison, yes or no? Look at the world. Only the difference here, and that's what keeps it going, is that now mobs have the right to hate and destroy. Just like prisoners in a prison believe they have the right to hate and destroy because of everything that's being done to them. It's breathtaking if you can see it, because in the fact of it is the negation of it. In the fact of seeing that, I am automatically brought to a point in time where I recognize beyond the shadow of a doubt that whatever it is that's trying to get me out of this moment I don't want is in fact the creator of the moment that I don't want. Are we still in the room? Do we lose anybody? No. It's a miracle. You have no idea how beautiful it is what I'm telling you, how unpalatable and terrifying, but how truthful it is and how beautifully the truth works to liberate anybody who is willing to see the truth of things. I remember when I was growing up, I even wrote about it in one of the books, how I realized one day that how ludicrous it was for me to want the approval of people that I would judge ordinarily. Because you judge everyone, don't you? And yet you want their approval. Anybody see a contradiction with that? That's a prison. Let's start our study together. Nice deep breath. Let's bring up the first list. We have miles to go. You ready? Let me know when it's up there. There it is. By what do you feel imprisoned? Under what circumstances are you most likely to feel as if you've been made an unwilling captive of some painful situation? By what do you feel imprisoned? Under what circumstances are you most likely to feel as if you've been made an unwilling captive of some unavoidable situation? So I'll prime the pump like I always do, and then I'll bring you in. When people are disrespectful, are you happy and free, or are you thrown into a prison? So I find myself imprisoned by the reactions I have to anybody that's disrespectful to me. Yes or no? How free are you when someone blames you for something, especially if you aren't really to be blamed? How are you then? I'm in prison. And please, and what's the nature of the prison I'm in when somebody blames me or betrays me? What's the prison? Is there actually did walls fall down around me? Did some guard appear with a big goatee and big cheeks? I was thinking about Midnight Run. I'm thinking about the guards in this Turkish prison. No, nothing came down around me, but I came under the influence of a powerful set of thoughts and feelings that are always justified in telling me what has produced this prison and then what I must do to restore myself to peace. One more, and then I'm going to ask you. How do you feel when something suddenly in life, you expected it to go this way, and all of a sudden it goes that way? When life doesn't meet your expectations, what happens to you? Slam goes the prison door, doesn't it? And then, what's the nature of the prison at that point? First of all, to understand, the only reason that it seems like I'm thrown in a prison is because the nature of the prison I'm thrown into is made up of my own resistance to that circumstance. There is no psychological prison that other than resisting a moment. None. Now, we're going to look at, when we go through this list, what's the real reason behind this resistance, this, in quotes, identification, where when it isn't confirmed, throws us into a jail cell of some kind. I need to bring you in. Let's have some hands. Chris. Anytime that I don't think, she said, that I don't feel like I have control, I'll just change it slightly. Every time I think I've lost control over a circumstance, I'm suddenly in prison. Because I had it all laid out. I knew who you were supposed to be. I knew how you were supposed to do it. Everything was quite clear. And then you messed with it. And you ruined it. And when you did, your actions threw me in prison. Yes or no? On the board, I got to go. Randall, needing the approval of others. That's a big one. We're going to get into that even more deeply. Imprisoned by my history. How about by self-loathing? Am I not imprisoned when I judge myself? Yes or no? Jane, the unknown. It's not really the unknown, Jane, that throws you in prison. It's your resistance to not knowing what's happening to you. It's not the unknown. What you fight with is that it isn't going to match the known that you expect. One, not knowing what to do, doubting myself, of course. When I compare myself to others, that's a big one, isn't it? Okay, in the room, please, anybody. John.
When I can't find the words to express what I want to communicate.
When I find myself unable to express what I want to communicate. Now let's look closely at this for a split second. What he's saying is that when I can't be who I imagine myself to be, then I am shrouded with a host of doubts that the more I think about where I'm missing the mark, the more I'm thrown into a prison called, look at you, you can't do this, and you resist that. Over to the board before we go to Ellen. When no one understands me, says Tony. Isn't that a big one? My mother, God bless her soul, she died many, many years ago. But she used to do this to me. I'd be unhappy about something and she'd go, poor little Guysy, poor little Guysy, no one understands him. God, that used to drive me mad. No one understands me. How sensitive I am. How delicate of a nature. How beautiful I am. Nobody understands. Nobody. Yes or no? And the minute that somebody even intimates in the smallest way that you are nothing like the image, and don't forget these words, that you are nothing like the image that you are identified with, the moment that happens, whew, prison walls, yes or no? On the board, people are going for this. When people expect me, people expect me to do things their way. My upbringing, which helped establish the many eyes with which I navigate the world. Rebecca, my upbringing, which helped establish. I'm imprisoned any time that something challenges the way I've been conditioned. That's basically what she's saying. Anytime someone, she says, by being made wrong, you're not made wrong. If you're not wrong, there's not a problem. But if you believe you're always right, you're already in prison, are you not? Carl, I feel imprisoned when I'm unexpectedly found in an awkward situation. People come up to the microphone here and they're thrown in prison. For the first time in their life, their mind goes quiet. Deborah, being patronized. Yeah, that's a big one. Paul says, by having too much to do. Any more in the room? Yes, David. I am thrown in prison when the pleasure that I demand and expect is overthrown by something that is uncomfortable to me in that moment. I struggle not with the conditions, but with my resistance born of expectations thwarted. That's where the prison is. You'll always find that the prison is inseparable from something that we are identified with without knowing it. Okay? Now, like I said, it's a big agenda. I got to keep going. Thank you, everybody. And there's lots more, but I can't cover them. Okay. Now, so we covered those moments where we feel imprisoned, yes? Now, have we not in the past, I ask you, we're making a little transition, have we not proven that it is actually impossible to be made a prisoner of any passing condition? It is impossible to be made a prisoner of any passing condition. Why? Why is it impossible to be made a prisoner of a passing condition? We've talked about this before at length. Because every passing condition changes everything that passes into and through it. There's no moment that isn't producing change. And there's no moment in which I am not changed if I'm a part of that movement. That much you can get, can't you? So if suddenly I feel like I'm a prisoner of some passing condition, what she said and how they are and what they did, and you know the drill, my God, you're buried by your own mind all the time. If that's going on, what am I actually a prisoner then in that moment? What has made me a prisoner? What has made me a prisoner? It can't be the moment itself. Something in me, resistance, has stopped the moment right at the point it needs to be stopped so that I can be someone who is now in prison because of what happened to my life. And I'm not saying that horrible things don't happen. What I am saying, the horror is not of the moment itself, but of the level of consciousness that doesn't know what else to do in those moments other than summarily resist it, suffer for the resistance, and then be thrown into the prison of this unconscious resistance born of identification. Yes or no? Please. So either way, I start as a prisoner. We're talking about now identification. We can see that this is a prison? Yes? Deep breath. How does this identification get started. What is the nature of this? We talk about it all the time, but if I was to ask you, what does it mean, identified and crucified, in the prison of identification? Because it does you no good to know, well, I am identified and I shouldn't be. That's what you do. I'm a terrible person. I'm identified. Yeah, that's what, and listen to me. And in that moment, for a moment, you're out of prison, aren't you? Because what happened in that moment? I'm just identified with another idea. So what's at the root of this nature called identification that produces, as it does, the resistance to anything that challenges that identity? What's at the root of it? If any of you can guess, Barb's.
My image of myself?
An image of myself. Nope.
I'm attached.
Yes.
We've planted a flag.
We've planted a flag. Yes. No. Dependency. Dependency. We don't understand anything about this pain of identification, because if we were to go into the prison of it and see the consciousness that produces it, we'd realize that identification and dependency are a singularity. Identification and dependency are a singularity. There is no identification without what you are depending on. And it seems when I am identified with something that I'm other than what I'm depending on, doesn't it? I'm depending on you to do this. I'm depending on the world to be like that. I'm depending on myself to get through this moment. And in that moment, it seems to us quite clearly that there's me who's in a prison in the moment because of whatever has taken place. And so clearly whatever it is that's threatening this identity, I need to have something else that I can depend upon, because I can't depend on what I depended on before. Do you see that? And what does that mind do when it says, well, you know what, I'm in prison because I was identified, and I can see, I was kind of depending on the day to work out the way I imagined it would. I was depending on you to see what I see, the light of it, the genius of it, whatever it was that you were expecting somebody to see. Are you not disappointed when people don't see what you see? And when you do you not judge them? And when you judge them, are you not in a prison? So here's the point. I don't understand anything about this pain of identification, because there is no identification possible without the illusion of duality. And that's what dependency is. It is part of an illusion of duality, that I am me and there is that which I need. That you are you and there is that in you that bothers me. That is called delusion. That is called the illusion of duality, where what? Where I and what I depend upon are different things. I'm depending on finding tomorrow everything's great. Now, can I depend upon tomorrow for it to be great unless something in me has imagined what tomorrow should be like? And in the imagination of what tomorrow should be like, I have an image, yes or no? And the image that I now have and hold that I'm dependent on can't be separated from the consciousness that produced it. Do you see it? So really what I'm depending on is an unseen act of self-creation by which, through something that I've imagined will free me and my identification with it, I'm liberated from the condition that collapsed on me that I was dependent on before. And this is called the vicious circle, isn't it, if you could see it? I'm sure that I am other than what I have imagined will free me, and I'm sure I am other than whatever it is that I'm resisting because it has threatened my freedom. Are we not sure of that? So that I am always pursuing or trying to protect what I believe has come to threaten me or to free me from what has threatened me. Bring up the second key lesson, please. Summary. Identification is dependency. There is no painful dependency without unconscious identification. They are two sides of the same conflict. You get the play on words, two sides of the same coin. Identification is dependency. Pure and simple. And there is no painful dependency without unconscious identification. They are two of the same sides. They are two sides of the same conflict. And what is it that I'm identified with? What is it that I'm always identified with? Please, I'm identified with yesterday. I'm identified with tomorrow. I'm identified with my hope that you'll be different. I'm identified with my anger or my hatred towards you because you're not different. So that no matter how you slice that particular loaf of bread, what you come up with that can't be escaped is that there is something inside of us that is always and forever, listen, entering into a moment, already having formed a dependency on something in this conditioned consciousness that has been formulated as a means to escape the conditioning of our consciousness. That's how it works. And it's a broken works. Because all that mind can do, well, let's bring you into it now. Bring up our second list. Are you ready, everybody, to go to work? Nice deep breath. One day you won't be afraid. One day you won't be afraid to see. Do you know why we're afraid to see the truth? Do you know why? Because to see the truth often interferes with what we're depending on to free us. And when we can't see the truth that our imprisonment is because of what we're dependent on, because it doesn't exist without an identification, a nature that's divided, we literally throw ourselves into every self, every I. And when we throw ourselves into that I throws away the key because it has the next way in which it's going to liberate itself from its misery. What are some forms of dependency that for our identification with them make them a prison we can't see, we create and agree to live within? This was actually something, this is such a broad topic. There was no way to cover everything, so I had to cut out a whole section of what I wanted to talk to you about. I wanted to talk to you about how you and I, with no idea whatsoever, are always creating dependency in other people. It's just part of the way this consciousness works. And ever so briefly, why do I want to make you dependent on me? So that I can depend on controlling you, and so that I can depend upon the image I have of myself as someone who deserves being respected and in command of everyone and everything around me. That's real codependency, but it's never recognized as such. You don't think to yourself when you're ingratiated. How many of you think that you're really a very lovely person? Are you're a little too wise, at least in this atmosphere. If you're with friends and drinking some wine, you are the loveliest person that ever lived. Right, Babs? Yeah. Look at me, lovely. Isn't she lovely? But push come to shove, the fact of the matter is that there is a beast lurking in this prison someplace. And in any moment where I somehow or other feel like I want something from you. And in order to get what I want from you, which is what? To confirm whatever identity I have in that moment. Isn't that what I want from other people? In order to get what I want from other people, I'll go ahead and slather them with whatever it is that will let them be confirmed in their own eyes. And then they depend upon me to keep that in place. And the rub here is that the more they depend upon me to keep that in place, which I put in place through an unconscious act, the more I resent the very dependency I produced in those people. Because now I have to carry on the act. I only wanted to do it for, two sections of the play. I didn't want to go all the way to the curtain call trying to make you believe that I really like you or that you're important to me. God forbid, now I got to go through the whole thing. And then I suffer the slavery of the dependency I created. I got that in. Well, it was such an important aspect to me, but we're unaware of it. But maybe we can work on that at another time. So, what are some forms of dependency? Now, I've made a quick list. Over up there, I'm welcoming you. Here's a quick. Isn't wanting the approval of anyone a form of dependency upon them? How about attachments of any kind? Isn't that a form of dependency? How about my reliance on consoling thoughts and feelings or needing you to console me? Isn't that a dependency? You may not think so, but when you find yourself in prison, how do you get out? How do you get out? I'll tell you how you get out. I just start having thoughts and feelings that are beautiful. I just imagine Christ coming to rescue me. I just think about Buddha, who has no problems at all, and soon I'll have no problems, and suddenly I'm out. But I'm not out of the prison. I'm just identified and dependent on another image that took the place of the one that imprisoned me the first time around. See it? Over to you. Anybody? Chris.
Being right.
I am dependent on you seeing me being right. Over on the board, we're getting some already. Sisterly love. Yeah. I depend on what I depend on what I think I deserve. Think about that. I deserve this. Now, whether you deserve anything or not is completely up to question, because the truth is you get what you deserve. You want to write something down to really irritate yourself and put it on the window where you live? Every moment of my life, I get exactly what I deserve. And why is it exactly what I deserve? Because I get the reflection of what I serve unendingly. That's called karma. On the board, having the image, I'm dependent on, Robert says, the image of being a doer. How many of you are doers? Come on, get him up. I'm a doer, man. Don't mess with me. In the room, who else? John.
Pleasure to distract me from the pain.
I am dependent on whatever pleasure I have imagined or consume, partake of, that as I'm doing it distracts me from my prison, from the pain of this prison. That's correct. Barbara.
The need to be appreciated.
I am so dependent on being appreciated. I can hardly breathe sometimes when I'm not appreciated. Isn't that true? You know, Barbs. I know it is so painful. It is so painful not to be loved the way that you love. Okay, quickly.
Physical comfort.
I am dependent on a certain modicum of comfort. Nothing too elaborate. Furs, expensive couches, plush carpeting, the finer things in life. Oh man. And then what happens the split second? I made myself, what did I have made myself? Oh, I made myself 2 corn muffins for lunch today. And I got them hot, and I got the butter out and the honey out. And I sat down, and I'd been working for like 8 straight hours. It was like 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And I'm getting ready to eat my muffins. And what happens? Along comes a spider. A phone call. Yeah, no, I mean, can you imagine? Now, why would that interruption be painful? Why? Because I was depending on the little pleasure that I deserve because of all the hard work I do. Yes or no? That is exactly it. And not to mention, then I resent deeply. And I even think to myself, can you just call me back after my muffins? You know, which is so crude and rude. Then you resent what? You resent the condition for the captivity of being identified and depending on a pleasure that really wasn't a pleasure at all if it turns into a prison. Do you see it with me? I got to go on. I want to talk about some other forms of unseen dependency, things that we don't usually think of, but I want you to start seeing this. What are we doing? We're trying to put 2 and 2 together, aren't we? So that we can start recognizing when suddenly I'm thrown into this prison, resistant, negative, angry, afraid, so that when that happens, instead of just struggling with the prison bars, paying off the guards, there's so many metaphors, aren't there? Pay off the guards. That's when you pay off people to do and act as you need them to do and act. That's codependency, so that you can go on believing that you are as you've imagined yourself to be. Some of this should be striking home, especially with some of you. So here's an unseen form of dependency. How about this one? I'm actually dependent on my own negative reactions. Am I not? When a negative reaction comes, I depend upon it to clarify everything for me. Because the negative reaction is obviously pointing to to what I don't see is actually a duality. This negative reaction is pointing to everything that I blame for interfering with whatever demand I had on the moment that was just interrupted by an uncaring God, by a life that doesn't care anything about me. So in an instant, I'm fully dependent upon my negative reactions for the identity that will free me from the identity produced by my own negative reactions. I actually look to negative reactions to tell me how to escape the experience of being negative. Yes or no? And is that not a prison? Is that not a circulating cell of individual selves that we don't know anything about? Yes or no? How about constantly comforting or consoling myself with some thought about security? That this is a rough patch, but by God, I'll get through this rough patch. You'll see I'm going to come out smelling like a rose. And when I imagine what it is that's going to get me through this rough patch, am I not instantly, not just identified with it, but then dependent upon that image or that plan in order to save me from the prison I'm in? Yes or no? And what's the actual nature of the prison itself? The fact that I am identified and dependent upon anything outside of myself at all. 4 minutes left. I have to cover this ever so quickly. My wife said that I had to. What happens in those moments when I'm like that? I can see, God, I am like Tony was saying, I depend upon people approving me, or whatever it was that anybody said, yes or no. What happens in that moment? What happens to us? I'm in pain. And I've heard this 100 times, so what's the answer? Well, I'm going to not identify. That's the plan to deal with my pain. I'm going to not identify with it. Can you begin to see that there's no such thing as not identifying? Because the only way I can not identify is to be identified with that which tells me, here's how to get out of this prison. Just stop identifying. Just grin and bear it. Just pretend like there's not a problem. I'm not identifying, I'm not identifying, I'm not identifying. And I couldn't possibly be more identified with an unconscious nature than when I listen to and take the directives of something that tells me the way to deal with this pain is to pretend I don't have it. Isn't that a prison? Now, so the problem is that I don't think it's a prison when I'm busy pretending that I'm safe and free and loving and full of God. I don't think to myself I'm in a prison when I'm doing that. Do you? Why don't I think I'm in a prison? Because I've just moved from one cell into another that's decorated other than the one I was in. I go, this is beautiful. Free at last. But I'm not free at last because I've yet to understand anything about this unconscious nature that is a prison maker, and I am complicit in the constant creation of those cells. Yes? Here's the exercise. We must actually learn to rely on what it means to, in those moments. And one day it will become, if you will, secondhand once you begin to get a taste of it. I must learn in that moment that I am not only, and they're the same thing, that in the moment when I feel resistance and I'm struggling, that when I'm in a prison cell, I am blinded by what put me there. When I am in this prison of self-fear, anger, I'm blinded by what put me there. And the reason I'm blinded, what put me there, is because when I'm in that cell, I'm looking, in quotes, out of that cell to something new to depend upon. So I am blinded not only by the resistance, but I'm blinded by the insistence of that nature that tells me, here's how you escape this, guy. Just go do this. And it's always the known, circling back to what I said. Yes? I need a new set of eyes. I need a new set of eyes, which means I need the awareness of a new eye that appears, and this is critical to understand, a new eye that appears whenever I am surrounded by and aware of all of the old eyes, all of the old conditioned nature pressing me into captivity. That new eye, this new awareness allows me to do what? Now please, remember I said that we have to go into this prison if we ever want to transcend it, because escape it isn't really it. Remember? I have to, in the middle of feeling like I'm in that prison, I have to be willing to see that there is no prison that exists outside of my own reactions. That there's no prison. That what I am a prisoner of and complicit in creating is an unconscious nature that cannot see itself, and the solution is to see the truth of that moment. When I see the truth of that moment, that this world is, in scale, a prison, and that our lives in this world are part of that prison. It is a single system divided up into castes. You know what castes are? Divided up into systems, seemingly separate systems, but they're all fractals. They're all part of the same thing. And if I can see that and bear it, because believe me, when you start seeing it, you're going to realize, God, no wonder. Because this is a world of demons and angels. It is. And if you don't know who's winning the battle right now, boy, are you in a sorry place. But they are not outside of us. They are characters and qualities that we are given as we come into this world. One in order to understand and transcend the other, instead of the other pushing us into the cell that it creates out of every self it makes when what we depend upon, attached to. Think of Buddha's Four Noble Truths. Last thought. How would you like a get out of jail free card? What do you think that get out of jail free card is? Do you remember the one thing, as you will? Do you remember that? Well, the get out of jail card in these moments is as you reveal. As I am given to see beyond the shadow of a doubt, eventually. There is one prison in this world, and it is not just the makings of an unconscious nature with which we have become completely conditioned by its identification, the duality, its duality. But that the moment I see that with clarity, I have been given the key to escape it, because I will not be complicit in my own captivity. Let's take a break. We'll come back and have our dialogue.
Welcome back, everyone. We're ready to get started. In another minute for our Q&A with Guy. I want to just mention a couple of important things coming up, and I'll do it briefly here today. We have a special banquet coming up on Friday, December 15th through the 17th, and anyone who'd like to come here in person, you're welcome to do that and encouraged to do it. It's kind of our holiday weekend of wisdom, we call it. And this year's topic, be in the world, but not of it. And if you can be here, that's great. It'll still be online. And everything you need to know about it, you can find out at guyfinley.org/weekend. Do participate in that and be part of that if you can, one way or the other. So it's also a great way to give back to us, to be part of it in this way. In the donations, because I think all of you know all of these classes are sponsored. These free classes are sponsored by Life of Learning Foundation, and any donation that you can give is needed. And thank all of you here who do give regularly to help this work go ongoing. And anytime, just remember guyfinley.org/donate. Anytime you want to make a donation to the foundation, know that all of the money goes right into bringing these ideas out into the world, like we're doing tonight. So there's your link, and do take advantage of that anytime. All right, let's go ahead. We're going to get back and we're going to get started. Let's bring Guy in. And as they're doing that, if you're on a GoToWebinar, you can talk to Guy directly by clicking on your hand icon. If you're new, it looks like that. It looks like a hand. Click on that, and that'll bring you into the queue. So we can do that right away. So, Guy, did you want to say anything before we get started?
If there are any hands, we can just launch into that. I always have a comment or two, but I'm happy to save them.
I have 3.5 written questions, and nobody in the queue yet.
Okay. Hit it.
We're going to hit it with the written. Okay, here we go. This one comes from Ellen. Ellen asks, you are always talking about opposites. Does love have an opposite, or is it considered to be whole without an opposite?
You are always talking about opposites. Does love have an opposite, or is it considered to be whole without an opposite? All human love has an opposite. Divine love doesn't. The opposites come out of divine love, and love understands that they are not separate. Therefore, he maketh the sun to shine on good and evil, on the opposites, without any judgment whatsoever. But we mustn't be concerned with trying as you will to somehow or other become this radiant light that loves all equally. It's a good intention, but if it is disconnected from the constant appearance of judgment and anger or resentment, regret, then it is delusionary. That's it, Doug.
Sorry about that. We do have Namita in the queue, Guy. I'm going to unmute her.
Hi, Guy.
Hi, Namita.
So my question is, actually, I realized that I hate Namita, and this comes to me many times, and I have tried to look into it, like why do I hate her? And I have noticed that it's like Namita and the seeing coexist, and the more I see, the more I hate Namita, and it has gotten to a point where like it's just I'm almost allergic to even the name or the whole. So I mean, I don't know if is this some kind of a natural progression, or am I doing something very wrong?
Yes and no. No and yes. First, the only reason we despise ourselves is because we are in love with ourselves, Namita. I can't despise Guy unless something in Guy believes he is far superior to the guy he despises. It's impossible. So we can be captured, we can be thrown into the prison of sitting and you say, I hate Namita. Translation, I resist her manifestation. Further translation, if I resist her manifestation, who is this I that resists being what I am? And then you see, well, there's this divided nature. And that divided nature depends upon having something to hate or love. That's what it requires. It requires to be separate from something. And it doesn't care whether it loves or hates. It could care less. All it wants is the sensation of itself. And the solution to that situation is to start catching this immediate negativity towards myself. If I see myself, there's no reason to be negative about it, because the awareness of myself is the end of any form of identification with myself as it appears in that moment. I had a note, like I said, I had something to talk about, and I think I'll throw it in here, Namita, just not because it answers specifically what you've asked, but because what you've asked points specifically to a very deep problem that we don't know we have. Nice deep breath, everybody. How many of you saw the movie Shawshank Redemption? Most of us. Pretty popular film. If you never saw it, it's worth seeing. But basically, Tim Robbins stars as a man wrongly or rightly accused of murdering his wife, and for the most part wrongly thrown into this hellhole, into a prison, speaking of which. And it's the story of a nightmare existence. And the beauty of his friend Morgan Freeman, who plays the character Red, and how they play off of each other, and how, without knowing it, Red plays a part of Tim Roberts, of his character, who has, for all intents and purposes, become institutionalized. And then we actually see the adventure of one of these old timers who's finally pardoned after 50 years, and he goes out and he can't make his way in the world. He's been institutionalized, and he takes his own life because he can't bear being out in the world. He would rather go back to prison. That's what institutionalized is. With God as my witness, we have all been institutionalized. And we don't have even the smallest clue that it's happened to us. What does it mean that I've been institutionalized? I believe that the hatred of myself proves that I'm other than what I hate. I've been institutionalized. Here's a fear of something, and I'm institutionalized to believe that the way I deal with the fear is to come up with another image and something to depend upon so I won't feel that fear anymore. That's institutionalized. I am part of an unseen system, an obscene system. But for me to hate the system that I become identified with is for me to be identified with someone who believes they're separate from the system they set themselves against. The freedom from the system is to see that it is, in fact, all that I am. And when that's clear, then I'm no longer that, to whatever extent it's true. You don't think you've been institutionalized. Every time you answer the phone, certain attitude comes up, certain way you treat people, certain way in which you look at fears or troubles or worries, the way you look at yesterday, the way you hope for tomorrow, your fear that someone's going to steal something from you that's rightfully yours. All of that is institutionalized mentality. And there's no freedom from the institutionalization of that consciousness other than to become acutely aware of how you are participating in its continuation. Because in the clarity of that, you are dismissed from it, to whatever extent it's true. And then you'll see, just right back, just like that. It's unbelievable, actually. You one day, when you start to wake up a little bit, you'll faint at the speed in which this institutionalized self starts talking to you, telling you what you have to do, where you have to go, how you have to handle this, all of this thought, believing that the thought's going to free you from the prison of thought that you got captured by when something challenged what you're identified with. So the solution, Namita, isn't to hate Namita. The solution is to be aware of how painful it is to hate anything. Because in the awareness that hatred is in complete contradiction to my wish to be a conscious human being, to be a free human being, then I can begin, as I said before, I'm going to have to die to the known. All I know to do when you disappoint me is to be angry with you. What else do you have? And if I'm not angry with you, then I'm thinking about ways to show you that I'm a loving person. That's institutionalized. And the big problem is what? The Shawshank Redemption, how did it end? With him crawling through 300 yards of the most disgusting possible condition in the world, and then coming out into a ditch where it was raining and he was washed clean. He was no longer he wouldn't be told, Red, we get busy living or get busy dying. See, I have to get busy living. Oh, but wait a minute, I'm not sure what that really is. Because the only answers I have are the answers of an institutionalized mind, a mind that's fully conditioned by the culture, the environment, the religious, fully conditioned. That's all I have to call on is everything that is institutionalized. And when I see that what is institutionalized can only keep creating an institution, I'm going to have to sit there washed clean, bare, new white robes, whatever analogy you want. So, Namita, that's it for me. Over to you, Doug.
All right, we have Neil in the queue, Guy. Here's Neil. I'm going to unmute you.
Hi, Guy.
Hi, Neil.
As we jump from cell to cell as a prisoner of our own minds and thoughts and resistance to what is, dependence, everything you've spoken about this evening, basically. As we go through this, and I know it plays a role, can you maybe explain a little bit where the ego comes in?
Yes, Neil.
Oh.
Neil, listen to me.
Thank you.
I can't be made a prisoner of a thought. That's impossible. A thought, for one thing, is just a little bit of an electromagnetic stuff. I can't be made a prisoner of a thought. What I am made a prisoner of is that I don't know myself outside of those thoughts. And those thoughts are all reliant and dependent upon some image that has produced my identity. So the thing isn't to sit and struggle with thought, because the struggle with thought is produced by a nature that wants to escape its own conditioning. It's to see it, Neil. This is what is inexplicable on the upper path. That there is another order of awareness that you and I are always invited to become a part of, but there is no known identity in that moment of light. There is just what that light reveals about what we have been identified with. That's all there is. So I can't find myself in that light, but I can see by that light where I have lost myself and given myself over to these thoughts and feelings. I hope that helps, Neil. On we go, Doug, if there's some place to go.
Yes, we have Susanna in the queue, not in the queue as a written question. She actually has two. I'm going to read them together.
Okay.
Susanna says, I'm suffering the burning, terrible pain of shingles. Do I stare, dance with the pain? My anger about my life condition has brought up the shingles. What do I do? I will repeat all day, as you will, obviously referring from Sunday. Then she asked tonight, is being angry at somebody an identification?
Oh, yes. You can't be angry at somebody, Susanna, without being identified with the way you imagine they should be or treat you. It's impossible. You can't get angry with anything unless it is that action or that person is contradicting something that you are clinging to as necessary for your identity. It's impossible. This is what codependency is. I depend on you to love me, and then I love you back. But that's not love. Now, as far as the shingles business, I believe you meant to write, do I stare? I think you mean, do I dare dance with the pain? My anger about my life condition has brought up the shingles. What do? I will repeat all day, as you will. There's absolutely no question that, in particular, the repetition of negativity not only coalesces and creates in this unconscious nature a kind of dark firmament, something that is almost always there once it has been formulated. And that the more that formulation takes place, the more I think about that person, keep the account, the more angry I become. And the more angry I become, the more I resist what I believe is the condition for that captivity. When the fact of the matter is, the captivity has nothing to do with what that person did, but rather with what my mind made of it when they didn't act or do what I needed them to do or be. That's just a fact. You can see it for yourself. So the question, do I dare dance with the pain? You know, I don't know if you knew this. I don't speak of it much, Susanna, but I'm no stranger to pain. Forget the spiritual aspect of it. I'm talking about just straight across the board physical pain. I would be a fool to say I can't imagine that I could have more, but pretty much everything that can happen to this body has happened to it. And I'd be lying if I said to you that it's a cakewalk when you're suffering. But I can tell you beyond the shadow of a doubt that it is what you do in the moments of that extreme suffering with your attention that determines whether or not you succeed in creating some distance between yourself and this unconscious nature that wants, actually, it doesn't seem like it, the more you resist your suffering, the more that nature wants it. I know that that seems impossible, but it's a fact. The more I resist my suffering, the more that I does so to strengthen the identity of being someone in this terrible condition, in this terrible place. So my answer, Susanna, is dare to, and I know these are very new age words, popular words. Dance with your pain, all that business. See what you can learn about your pain, even if it's just for a split second. You've already made some connections by the comments that you've made that there's some relationship between this unresolved anger and the fact that something is tearing at you now physically. There's no question about their relationship. But what you must question, and I hope that you will, is this necessity then that I have to judge myself for my anger. Because look what it's done. Because then I'm right back in this consequence consciousness, that which is measuring and weighing what is taking place now as a result of something in the past. And if only I hadn't been like that, then I wouldn't be suffering the way I am. That's ludicrous. Because then the suffering is exacerbated because now it's held, you're holding something that you couldn't have changed. You are what you are and you were what you were. So that surfaced as it does. Now use it, Susanna. God, if I don't use my life for the purpose it's given to me to use, what am I doing? The divine never gives us a condition that, if understood properly, doesn't bring about the unfinished business that brought that condition into existence. And when that condition is fully met, the condition passes. You'll see. To you, Doug.
I just got a question from YouTube from Kate, and I'm not exactly sure where you said this, but she said, you said that's not love, but what is love then, she asks. You said that's not love.
Yeah, I said that's not love.
What is love? Okay.
What I said is that there is a minimum of 6, 7, and actually it's unending. Like Eskimos have 30 words for snow. The love of food isn't love. Feels like it, doesn't it? I love that. I love that cake. I love chocolate. I love it. Because what is the experience of that love other than me fully identified with the sensation, the memory of that pleasure? So what I really love is myself, whether I see it or not. I love that. No, I love football. I pray that my team kicks the butt of the other team. Well, that's not love. That's an unbridled form of ambition where I'm so identified with who and what I think should win that I don't care what happens to anybody else. That can't be love, can it? Can it? No. So we can go through all these different kinds of love. I love my wife. I do love my wife. But that's a form of familial love. It can be part of an erotic love. So a love that is based on something outside of myself that I derive an identity from, whatever that may be, that should my wife or anybody else that I love suddenly act against me, out the window goes the love I have for them. Not that the love, this is the real love, that underneath that remains. Because the love that is underneath that doesn't take part in judging. It isn't part of separating myself out from what I love. It is the unity. So that then a real relationship that has love in it is forever revealing to the parties in that relationship another order of love that does make the sun to shine on good and evil alike. That's what real love is. It is unconditional. And the last thing I'll say about that is the reason it's unconditional is why? Because I have no identity derived from it at all. That's what unconditional is, apart from the conditions that I place on love. That's conditional love, and it is always an incomplete love, as opposed to the words not real love, an incomplete love. Anything else, Doug?
No, that's a wrap on this end, Guy.
That's a wrap here too. Good night. I'll see you Saturday, Inside Timer, or Sunday back on webinar and wherever you're streaming this.